Hello, everyone, and welcome to the seventh episode in our series, GCSE series on the Lord of the Flies. If you haven't seen this channel yet, basically what we're doing is each week going through key characters, key themes, key quotes, model answers, model paragraphs, context, the author, basically all the stuff you need to be successful in your GCSE on the Lord of the Flies. I've also got a ton of other series on different texts like Macbeth, Inspector Calls, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, got poetry series, language series. So yeah, feel free to check all that out if you're sitting the exams this year or next year or in the next few years and you just want to get a head start. Okay, so today's lesson, I have to do a shout out to someone called Will. He put a comment in recently and said, could I do a video on fear? So in previous weeks so far, we've done Ralph, Jack, Piggy, Simon, the Beast. We've also done civilization versus savagery. Today's lesson was going to be probably on violence and the loss of innocence, but because of that comment, I try and listen to people as they need help and so on. So shout out to Will. We're doing a video today on fear because that was something he wanted to cover. And, you know, if I get a request on something that I don't think is likely to come up, then I won't do a video on it. But fear is actually a pretty good theme. There's a decent chance that something to do with fear, paranoia, that sort of thing could come up. So I think it's good to do a lesson on that for Will and anyone else that wants to increase their what am I trying to say? Improve their mark basically in their GCSE. So I'm going to do a ton of quotes on fear. And then we're going to do a model paragraph on fear. So it's one of those themes where it's kind of silly to even spend time talking about what fear is and what it does, because the whole novel is just filled with fear, right? So you've got, at the very beginning, certain characters are fearful. So Piggy, from the moment they crash on the island, is fearful. He understands the gravity of the situation. Other characters, their fear develops over time. Part of this is because they're all children. So, you know, they don't fully understand the world yet. They're doing the best they can in the position they've been put in. Other than that, fear is one of obviously the major drivers in the entire novel. It's one of the major things that shapes the characters and also shapes the narrative. So other than that, I think we should just dive in and talk about lots of different quotes that show fear. And that's going to help you to write much better on this theme or idea if it does come up in the exam. So we may still stay here till we die. So obviously straight away, this is a very fearful quote. Piggy is the one that says this, I believe. So, you know, it's just the gravity of the situation. And I think that Ralph says similar things later on. I think several characters have this same epiphany, or what's called anagnorisis, this moment of realization that they actually are in a lot of trouble. And, you know, Ralph takes a bit longer to understand this. At the beginning, when he's talking to Piggy, he's like, oh, you know, Daddy will come pick us up just once he's done winning this war or whatever. The naivety of a child, right? But the truth is that there is this ever-present fear that they could just stay here forever. And that fear gets worse and worse as obviously civilization crumbles more and more, savagery takes over more and more. But straight away, short, simple sentence, very, very good for exposing the fear that is always really with the boys. With that word, the heat began to increase till it became a threatening weight, and the lagoon attacked them with a blinding effulgence. So the other thing about the whole novel, there are these low points and these high points, right? So some of the lowest points come from fear. It's fear that drives them to do a lot of the terrible things that happen in the novel as well. And when that fear sinks in, often being on the island becomes that much more unbearable. So the heat begins to increase. It creates a threatening weight on them. Imagine like how claustrophobic you would feel being stuck on an island with no way to get home. If you haven't ever watched the movie Castaway, great movie to like think more carefully about how it would how it would feel to be stuck on an island like this. So yeah. With fear comes also a lot of claustrophobia, a lot of like other negative emotion. The ground beneath them was a bank covered with sparse grass, torn everywhere by the upheavals of fallen trees, scattered with decaying coconuts and palm saplings. Behind this was the darkness of the forest proper and the open space of the scar. So there's lots of negative imagery and fearful imagery when we talk about the setting as well. That's another place you can look at fear. So the sparse grass, it's this idea that it's kind of decaying and not good, torn everywhere by upheavals of fallen trees, decaying coconuts, darkness, scar. There's all of these word choices that create this semantic field of just darkness and fear and just this kind of slight paranoia. And this is early on. This is in chapter 1, I believe. Yeah. So this also maybe forebodes and foreshadows the deeper paranoia and the deeper fear that will come as we go through the novel and as we start to see the boys getting scared of the beast and scared of each other, scared of everything, right? Another big way that fear is used early on, so again, this is chapter 1, is in describing some of the boys. So the Jack's choir and everyone, as they come up to the first meeting, they're described in a very fearful and monstrous way. So there's this diamond haze of the beach, something dark was fumbling along. So you get this sort of monstrous creature. Ralph saw it first and watched until the intentness of his gaze drew all eyes that way. Then the creature stepped from mirage onto clear sand, and they saw that the darkness was not all shadow, but mostly clothing. The creature was a party of boys. So straight away in chapter 1, Golding uses this this kind of imagery of Jack and the choir boys to hint at the fact that the deepest fear really comes from the beast or the darkness within them, right? So almost all of the fear really comes from that. But there are, like I said, there's the Gothic setting as well to some extent. It's like this beautiful beach setting, but there's a lot of Gothic in the way it's described as well. And this fear is something that really holds the boys back. Ralph laughed, the other boys laughed with him. The small boys twisted further into himself. Tell us about the snake thing. No, he says it was a beastie. Beastie? Snake thing, ever so big. He saw it. Where? In the woods. He says the beastie came in the dark. All of this is in chapter 2. So at first, some of the boys try to laugh off the fear, right? So Ralph is one of the most resilient in that sense. He doesn't believe in the beastie to begin with at all. He's not scared of being on the island alone. He sort of naively believes that his dad is going to somehow come and pick him up and save him. But there's a lot less fear at the beginning, and it's really the beast that starts to amplify the fear the most. So we've got this subtle fear of, you know, the choir boys and Jack look like a monster stumbling up the beach. That's pretty scary. The setting is quite Gothic and scary in parts. Other characters know that being trapped on the island is very claustrophobic and they may never get home, so that's very fearful. There are other characters like Ralph that don't really take the fear very seriously to begin with. He dismisses the beast, doesn't believe in it. I think I talked about this when I did a video on the beast, so feel free to check that out. But the idea that the beast is representing the Garden of Eden as well, right? And obviously that is a terrible story. It's a story about mankind rejecting God and therefore God casting mankind out of their natural home, which is the Garden of Eden, right? And so this snake thing in the woods is meant to show that demonic, satanic, serpentine sort of imagery that comes from the Bible. Golding was a Christian. All of the novel has that Christian undertone to it, like this. Simon, you've noticed, haven't you? Jack put down his spear and squatted. Noticed what? Well, they're frightened. He rolled over and peered into Jack's fierce, dirty face. I mean, the way things are. They dream. You can hear them. Have you been awake at night? Jack shook his head. They talk and scream, the little ones. Even some of the others, as if it wasn't a good island. As if, said Simon, the beastie or the snake thing was real. Remember? Simon's a really interesting character because he is one of the other characters that is really not fearful. But there's a big difference between Ralph and Simon. Ralph isn't fearful because he's kind of a bit ignorant to what's going on, whereas Simon isn't afraid even though he knows what's going on. He gets ridiculed for even suggesting that the beast is really them, but he understands deeply the fear that is coming onto the island, whereas Jack doesn't understand it at all. Simon is like trying to explain it to Jack. Jack kind of looks like a monster himself because, didn't sleep well last night. He doesn't seem bothered, and his face is fierce and dirty. This may also link to the painted faces, which is another way that fear is stricken into the society, because Jack is scared to kill the pig. Jack is scared to kill the pig when he first when he first sees a pig, right? But then he puts the face paint on, becomes a totally different person, a new character, a new facade. It's at that point that he is able to stab the pig. And eventually that develops into being able to stab and kill humans and even premeditatively try and kill Ralph. So the beast grows within Jack. And Simon notices the fear that's all out over the island. But Jack doesn't really notice it. He's quite ignorant. The same as Ralph, really, particularly at the beginning. Maybe there is a beast, maybe only it's us. This is Simon. So again, this is him trying to explain that the beast is a part of the darkness of man's heart, which I'll talk about later. Whereas Piggy is the opposite. Piggy's like, well, life is scientific. That's what it is. In a year or two, when the war's over, they'll be traveling to Mars and back. Shout out to Elon Musk finally getting us there. I know there isn't no beast, not with claws and all that, I mean, but I know there isn't no fear either, unless we get frightened of people. So it's really funny because both Simon and Piggy recognize that the beast is the major problem. Both of them realize this, but they come to it in different ways. So Simon believes there's like maybe a spiritual, metaphorical beast, whereas Piggy says, well, no, it's all scientific and logical. There is none. So Simon believes that there could be a figure like Satan or a demon, right? Whereas Piggy doesn't believe that, but he does believe there's evil in humans. And so their fear comes from slightly different places. Fear can't hurt you any more than a dream. There aren't any beasts to be afraid of on this island. Serve you right if something did get you, you useless lot of crybabies. So this is now Jack's reaction. So while Simon and Piggy are debating what fear is and where it comes from, Jack is much more utilitarian and much more practical. He says, look, fear can't hurt you. You're just being a bunch of crybabies. So he is a lot more tough and hardened. He doesn't really care about fear, even though he's wrong. Obviously, fear can hurt you. Fear ends up hurting them terribly. Fear is like the major catalyst for all of the bad stuff that happens on this island. He doesn't care about it. He doesn't care about fear. He's much more of just a practical type of leader. He just wants to go out and kill pigs and feed them and be the king. That's all he cares about. Simon, walking in front of Ralph, felt a flicker of incredulity. A beast with claws that scratched, that sat on a mountaintop, that left no tracks and yet was not fast enough to catch salmon. However, Simon thought of the beast. There rose before his inward sight the picture of a human, at once heroic and sick. One of the best fear quotes. So Simon is basically understanding that there's no way that there could be a beast that is the beast that they are describing. It couldn't have claws and scratch and sit on a mountain top, yet not leave any tracks and not be fast enough to catch salmon, Eric. The qualities of this beast don't make sense as a real thing. But then he thinks about the beast and what he sees is a picture of a human being. So he understands, as I said, that the fear and the beast and the darkness all comes from within humans and perhaps spiritual, like demonic, etc., but there's not an actual physical beast on the island. And I think that links later to when Ralph finally realizes that the fear comes from the darkness of man's heart. And then this is at the time when World War II is going on, right? Full of fear, paranoia, beastly action between different soldiers killing each other. It was furry. There was something moving behind its head, wings. The beast moved too. That was awful. It kind of sat up. There were eyes, teeth, claws. We ran as fast as we could. So this is Sam and Eric's description of the beast. This is another way that fear is important. Fear generates paranoia and makes the boys see things that aren't there. So, you know, the boys did see something, Sam and Eric did see something real, which was the pilot, right? The parachute and the pilot. But because of their fear, instead of seeing something horrible, which would be the corpse of the pilot, they make up in their head that it was a beast and the parachute was wings and all this crazy stuff. And we see that fear does that to Ralph and Jack and Roger later when they go up the mountain and they feel like they see the beast even though they don't see the beast, right? So the fear links into also paranoia here a lot. In front of them, only 3 or 4 yards away, was a rock-like hump where no rock should be. Ralph could hear a tiny chattering noise coming from somewhere, perhaps his own mouth. He bound himself together with his will, fused his fear and loathing into a hatred, and stood up. He took 2 leaden ships forward. So this is the paranoia and the fear, as I said, as they go up the mountain. They start to hear things and see things that aren't really there. And that's a big problem. Someone's got to go across the island and tell Piggy, we'll be back after dark. Bill spoke, unbelieving. Through the forest by himself. Now, we can't spare more than one. Simon pushed his way to Ralph's elbow. I'll go if you like. I don't mind, honestly. So this is the bit where they've been exploring. They left all the little ones with Piggy. And just look at the cojones on Simon. Like, Simon is fine to just go out into the dark wilderness on his own. He doesn't care. So again, that makes Simon one of the more heroic characters. And that makes it more tragic when he dies, because he's one of the few characters that sort of understands the fear to some extent and stands up to the fear, whereas all the others aren't able to do this. And yet Simon is the one, unfortunately, that dies, which is one of the big milestones of what happens, or the bad stuff that happens. Jack becomes more afraid over time and more superstitious. So while Simon is okay to like wander through the forests alone in the dark even, Jack becomes more and more superstitious and gives the heads of the pig as a gift to the Lord of the Flies. And he also becomes more and more paranoid. So after Simon is killed, Jack says, I expect that the beast disguised himself. So he starts to give the beast supernatural qualities, even though he's never seen the beast. And he sort of convinced himself, well, yeah, Simon was actually the beast. The beast like just disguised himself. And yet they killed the beast, and yet he believes the beast is still real. So his paranoia and confusion about this, and the fact that his fear is making him irrational, is really important. Perhaps we better keep on the right side of him anyhow. You can't tell what he might do. Jack, the only thing Jack is really afraid of is the beast, but he also uses fear himself to generate power within his tyranny. And then obviously the darkness of man's heart. They realize that through all of this, it's really the darkness of man's heart that is the biggest problem. So there's a ton of quotes for you on this topic. Just going to highlight this green so I don't forget later. So we'll finish up as usual with a paragraph on the topic. So we're going to do a paragraph on fear. So what is the significance of fear within the novel? Fear is the greatest catalyst within the novel and is the driving force of almost everything within it, within the narrative. At first, fear is somewhat mocked particularly by the big uns, who don't believe in the beast or listen to the stories of the little ones. Some characters understand that their fear actually comes from themselves, such as Simon. For example, Simon says maybe it's only us. As Golding concludes in the final chapter. However, this fear progresses and grows and ultimately allows Simon to take over the island, that would be a very different island, allows Jack to take over the island. He himself seems to buy into the fear. And that's like offering sacrifice to the beast. Short sentences show Jack's fear and respect for the beast. And arguably, it is the only thing he's afraid of. This is significant because Golding fought in World War II, would have seen the fear and seen the consequences and evil actions of fear in war. Okay, so that's a good paragraph, hopefully, for you on the significance of fear. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, please do leave them down below. Well, I hope that that helps you with your fear question. And yeah, I'll catch you next time.